بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا ليجزي الله الصادقين بصدقهم ويعذب المنافقين إن شاء أو يتوب عليهم إن الله كان غفورا رحيما ورد الله الذين كفروا بعظهم لم ينالوا خيرا وكفى المؤمنين القتال وكان الله قويا عزيزا صدق الله العظيم.
Ladies and gentlemen, without an iota of doubt, Pakistan has shown unflinching commitment to fight terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Since the 9/11, Pakistan has suffered the most, both in terms of economic and human losses. Despite these huge losses, the people of Pakistan, its valiant forces and civilian security personnel have been resilient in fight against terrorism. December 16th, 2014 was a day when Pakistani nation was jolted as it witnessed a mass murder of 122 innocent children in Army Public School Peshawar at the hands of the terrorists. This incident not only convinced the government of Pakistan to take on the terrorists on all fronts and with full force, but also resulted in national consensus against terrorists in the form of National Action Plan. Implementation of the National Action Plan has ushered in significant successes in several fields in the fight against terrorism. The fact sheet, which is being launched this evening, is to commemorate the sacrifices of the innocent martyrs of the Army Public School Peshawar and briefly present Pakistan's counterterrorism efforts. Now to present a tribute to the innocent souls who were martyred in December 2014 by the terrorists who came from Afghanistan, let us watch a brief documentary followed by a song made in the memory of those children. United Nations in Geneva, but also served as the country's focal point at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC. He then remained OIC Secretary General's spokesperson and Executive Director of OIC's Independent Human Rights Commission. In Pakistan, Mr. Sheikh remained extensively engaged in drafting Pakistan's national security policy as Joint Secretary of the National Security Division from 2014 to 2015. May I, sir, request you for presenting a preview of the fact sheet on Pakistan's counterterrorism effort?
For I belong to the brave nation whose children you fear. You just saw the song. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a part of Greek mythology. It, in a very grave terms, gives the contradiction between war and peace. In peacetime, in peacetime, children bury their fathers. In times of war, it's the other way around. Fathers bury their children. Pakistan has been the frontline state in the war against terror since 2001.
Sir, sorry, ये लाइट जलवा दीजिए.
लाइट प्लीज जला दीजिए. For the last 16 years, from Operation Al-Mizan to Operation Zarbiaz to the now continuing Operation Radul Fasad, we have conducted 13 operations, 13 anti-terror operations, and we have incurred great losses as a nation in this endeavor. In 2014, we launched Operation Zarbiaz, which was perhaps the largest anti-terrorist operation in world history. Certainly, it was a most successful one. During the course of that operation, once it was in place for 6 months, we had a watershed moment in our history, and particularly in our fight against terrorism. The smallest coffins are the heaviest. You see the picture in its caption. No less than 122 children were brutally massacred by terrorists who our nation was fighting. They were trained to kill people, motivated by for killing the children whose parents were fighting them. Army Public School, as the nomenclature suggests, was an institution where mostly children of army personnel were being educated. It was a grave moment in our history, a black day. But it didn't set us back in any way. Pakistan is a resilient nation, and we have proven it time and again in our history. This was no exception. It only consecrated our resolve as a nation to fight terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and rid our society, our polity, our nation, our geography of the last terrorist. And since then, with a renewed resolve, we have performed. The object of this event is twofold. First is, of course, to commemorate the APS tragedy, and also to pay homage to the Pakistani security forces, the Pakistani law enforcement agencies, and above all, the brave people of Pakistan who have been part of this ongoing endeavor day in, day out, with the consecrated resolve that I mentioned for the past 3 years. Operation Zarbiaz, as I have mentioned, is the largest operation, terrorist operation in the history of the world, perhaps. A successful one at that. But there is a lot more to the anti-terrorist campaign. Operation Zarbiaz was the pivot, but it has been complemented and its gains have been consolidated by a wide array of operations conducted in the length and breadth of Pakistan. The booklet actually, that we are launching today encapsulates some of these activities in different sections. Just to give an idea of the wide array of operations that I mentioned that were conducted throughout the country to complement the gains of Zarbiaz. And as a nation, we are resolved that after this tragedy, which attacked our future, which attacked the future of this world, it is unforgettable, it is unforgivable. Forget we shall not, and forgive we will not. I'll just briefly introduce you to some of the contents of this book. Please don't forget to grab your copy before leaving this hall. I suppose it will be distributed also. It can be distributed at some point in time during this gathering. The dedication that you have seen, it also appears on the first page of this booklet. And then it goes on to give a preface of or a kind of a roundup of the kind of activities that Pakistan has conducted during this anti-terror operation. Again, I would say that we have done this not only to give the world, the people of the world, an idea of how deep, how broad this anti-terrorist operation has been, and that the success has not just come about because of a fluke or something, but it has been a deep-seated, deep-rooted, thought-through effort, a very disciplined effort that has been conducted in Pakistan. But also the idea is that we have observed at times in this capital and also in some other capitals of the world a tendency towards a reductionist approach, an approach to perhaps miniaturize Pakistan's achievements in the realm of counterterrorism. This book contains certain stark realities, facts and figures which only go to prove that nothing in this regard can be blurred. We are, as a nation, unanimously involved in this exercise. There are 3 sections in the book. The first section gives point-wise implementation of the National Action Plan. This plan was evolved again unanimously through not only consensus but unanimity across all political, ethnic, religious divides in Pakistan, civil and military. And it was a 20-point agenda whose implementation status in each case appears in this book. Some of the points I'll just quickly go through in the interest of just saving time and being brief. The first postulate was execution of convicted terrorists, and for that, through the second point in NAP, special trial courts were established. Now, it is important to note that these trial courts were established for summary trial, but in consonance with all the legal requirements afforded by international law. Particularly, they were in consonance with the General Comment number 32 of UN Committee on Human Rights, which allows the possibility to any nation or country to establish summary courts as long as there is a possibility of appeal, which has been afforded in this case. Then an important point here is registration and regulation of madrasas. That has also been conducted through a countrywide action, and the registration is being made, and data forms are being finalized in consultation with Association of Religious Seminaries at the federal and provincial levels. There's also been a ban on glorification of terrorism and terrorist organizations through print and electronic media, so the space that was being afforded to these organizations in the name of freedom of press has been restricted. Another point that I would want to highlight in this regard is that there was a source of a lot of discontent coming from the city of Karachi, which is the commercial hub of Pakistan, and Karachi operation to be taken to its logical conclusion was a point here, and we have all seen and witnessed the results that have come about. The second section speaks about the anti-terrorist financing actions taken by Pakistan. Specific instructions by a state bank were issued to all banks to freeze the accounts of entities that have been proscribed under the UN sanctions regime or otherwise in Pakistan. Also, the Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, being an important financial institution to that end, was issued guidelines. It issued guidelines to companies under its purview to implement assets freeze measures against listed individuals and entities. The section you can read in the booklet, which lists a lot of these activities. The third section is talking about NACTA, which is basically the institutional expression of the anti-terrorist campaign that is being conducted in Pakistan in the area of law enforcement by the law enforcement agencies. And NECTA has been, during this 3-year implementation period, reviewing and revisiting lists of proscribed persons in accordance with the Anti-Terrorism Act of 1997, which basically is the governing legislation in the fight against CT. And as a result of the review, deficiencies in certain fields were observed and rectified during this process. So it has also been a capacity building exercise as we have incrementally proceeded in this 3-year period. Pakistan as a nation and its law enforcement agencies, which are primarily fighting the war against terrorism, have been building their capacity during this endeavor as well. And then there is also an international liaison activity of NECTA in which linkages with local and international organizations engaged in the area of not only counterterrorism, but countering violent extremism in accordance with the relevant UN resolutions have been established, including some of the institutions here in this capital. Perhaps USIP is a name there. Basically, the idea behind issuing this fact sheet is to give still a brief snapshot of the length and breadth of the effort that has been conducted. It is such an enormous effort that it cannot be encapsulated in its true sense. The people of Pakistan, for instance, it has changed the anti-terrorist fight. The CT campaign in Pakistan has changed the civic life in Pakistan in a big way. In entering all the major cities in Pakistan, you have to face checkpoints where the search operations are conducted. It certainly impedes the free flow of traffic, and there are traffic jams, etc. But the people of Pakistan, in the true spirit of nationhood, being part of the unanimity in the fight against terrorism, have been cooperative and have been facing this day in, day out. So I
commend those who have put together this booklet. I think it certainly makes the strong case here about how much the task of dealing with terrorism has reached the consciousness and also the legislative realms of Pakistan, and not to mention the military operations. And I want to say that it's Zarbalaz which really is I think the watershed time, following, of course, the massacre in Peshawar, the attack at the airport in Karachi. It's important to take away from this, though, that it happened not because of American pressure. American pressure to do more, that familiar phrase, to do more is not really what got Pakistan, I think, to take as seriously as I think many of us would have wanted. It took Pakistan's own recognition that this was a problem it had to solve for its own sake, not to please anybody else. I think that's very important here. Now we recognize that the implementation of this is through the program of NAP, and again, I think that you would, if you go through the 20 points, you would find it difficult to see that anything important has been left out. It's comprehensive, it's clearly well designed here. And there's no question that there are consequences from that which have, I think, registered here with particularly the people of Pakistan, who feel a great deal more comfortable now following this. But I also want to say honestly that there's still much more to do. It would be mistaken here to think that the job is anywhere near completion. There still are, unfortunately, and we've seen very recently, the attacks on sectarian groups in the country. This has to be dealt with. There's a great deal now here for greater cooperation, coordination among the intelligence services if this is going to be fully successful. The funding for NACTA has to be provided to a greater degree. What Pakistan is up against here is this constant argument that Pakistan has good and bad, has different policies, good and bad terrorists. Now, I think Pakistan has been very clear here that it considers all extremists, militant extremists, as its enemies. Nevertheless, though, it has still the optics here to deal with. And I must point out, in all honesty, that, and this should upset us now, that there are still the spokespeople of militant extremism who are still in this democratic system given leave to speak, to hold rallies. And I think of Maulana Rizvi recently, also, of course, a rally that occurred recently, which Hafiz Saeed conducted. And these have been, I think, provocative. So I mention these because it's necessary for Pakistan to be concerned about its image, what the optics are here. And I think that if fully we're going to be able to see the United States accept the way in which Pakistan has sincerely sought to deal with terrorism, it's going to have to confront those kinds of news events which are going on at this point. Well, I don't want to spend any more time here, except I want to say what I think is ultimately going to be necessary to really deal with terrorism in Pakistan and indeed in the region. And I think of nothing more important than the cooperation between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Without that kind of cooperation on counterterrorism, I don't believe that either country will be able to deal with what is for them their most immediate and even existential problem. So I recognize, we all do, the suspicions and the distrust that exists, but this has to be overcome. If there's going to be stability, if there's going to be regional peace. And it really is the best way, I think, ultimately, to avoid the kind of rhetoric that we saw just yesterday from Vice President Pence, which is, I think unfortunate, and but I think Pakistan has a task ahead of it here, as well as laying out the facts as it has in this booklet, but also to recognize what it is that draws these kinds of statements from my country and other countries, which in the long run do not serve their purposes or Pakistan's purposes. So I'm trying to present finally then a balanced understanding here of how much has been done and yet how much has yet to be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Towards the end, I have the privilege of inviting His Excellency Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Ambassador of Pakistan to the United States.
थैंक यू बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। बड़ा दुश्मन बना फिरता है जो बच्चों से लड़ता है। What a coward, lowly enemy we have who fights with children. I don't know where you were on 16th of December 3 years ago, but I do remember vividly. And when this happened, there was hardly an eye which did not swell. Even this night, when I was seeing it, I couldn't control my emotions actually. You only have to visualize, theoretically only, your child to be one of them. And then you would know what pain it is. Thank you, Rizwan, for putting it all together. I know that you and your team worked very hard on it. The idea came when our Interior Minister was here and he spoke at SAIS. And many people said that this was useful information we should put together into writing, and that's what this team has done. Because there was not that much appreciation of what Pakistan has done. But it's now getting there. I think people are beginning to realize what an enormous sacrifice Pakistan had to pay to achieve the results that we have achieved. Rizwan said that this is our war and we're going to win it. It is true that it has become our war, but actually it was not our war. It was an imposed war. People of Pakistan never had this as our war. I don't want to go into history. You all are very much familiar that it all started 38 years ago, 39 years ago, when Soviets came into Afghanistan and this concept of Afghan jihad emerged. And when Soviets left, these militants stayed back, and after 9/11, when Tora Bora was bombed, they moved towards Pakistan. So if you see the back page of this booklet, you would see that it was in the early part of this century that they started trickling into Pakistan after 9/11 to take refuge there. And within years, they had taken nearly 1/3 of the territory, and the other 1/3 was contested. And even then people couldn't believe that it is our war. And there was a debate within our country that this is not our war. Because there was a flawed narrative that these people had spread. But eventually, all politicians got together, built a national consensus that it may not have been our war, but it has become our war. Because these people have now intruded into Pakistan. And that's where we reacted, and we did launch this military operation. And many of you may have only heard about that area. Our next defense attaché, Brigadier Kamal, who is sitting here, actually has served in North Waziristan. So he knows firsthand what kind of terrain it was, what kind of target it was, what kind of enemy it was. And that's why it was a huge cost that we paid. But we finally came out of it. And we're very happy about it. That 3 years down the line, as we commemorate this, we also recognize that a lot has been accomplished. Marvin, thank you very much for your views. I agree with you. You asked a right question. Has the job been done? No. The job has been done to a point, but the war against terrorism is not over. We have to address that mindset which germinates this kind of extremism and extremist behavior. We're going to go after that. And people are doing that. People are quite prepared. But what does hurt us when this is not recognized, and the blame is apportioned to Pakistan for something that we have not done. Pakistan is not responsible for instability in Afghanistan. In fact, we have suffered from instability in Afghanistan. Whenever there is instability, it permeates through the borders to Pakistan. When Soviets left, they left. And when the Americans would leave, they would leave. We would always live right there next to Afghanistan. Therefore, we have vested national interest in seeing Afghanistan stabilize. It's not a favor to anyone. It's our own interest. And we believe that the United States too has an interest in stabilizing Afghanistan. After all, it's a long war. US has also paid in blood and treasure. So if the two are sharing that objective, where's the difference? And that's what our message to our US interlocutors has been. That terrorism is our common enemy. Let's keep it common enemy. And let's work together. And you will not find Pakistan wanting. Because Pakistan has shown results since 2011 or so, when Arab Spring started, which became Arab Autumn and then Arab Winters. Countries with half the challenge, their armies disintegrated. The countries evaporated. But Pakistan is resilient because the people of Pakistan are resilient. And we faced it, and we have now reversed that tide of terrorism, and we are happy about it. Again, it's not a favor to anyone. It's our own job, because it's our country. It's our posterity. But there are still a number of extremists who live. But they are not our share only. Remember, every country and every society has its own share of extremists. They need not be associated with any ethnicity, nor with any religion. And I believe that Pakistan, having come this far, will not rest until we fully win this war. So I think occasions like these are also a pledge to continue the mission. As Marvin rightly pointed out, there are a number of challenges. He spelled out some of them. Absolutely. We need to overcome those challenges, and we will, because we have set the direction. And God willing, we will succeed. Thank you very much for sparing your time for this Friday afternoon, but it's such a treasure and an honor that you are with us to commemorate and pay homage to these young martyrs who did so much to awaken the conscience of Pakistan and the world. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless America. God bless Pakistan.